Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new revenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
First one is titled, Grope My GF? We'll see about that. Back in late 80s I got a vacation job at a small hotel, restaurant, pub while I was at uni. I'd do everything from pot wash through to night clerk but mainly was either on bar shift or waitering. The restaurant was pretty high-end and was very popular for functions. This story is set in a function of about 50 over 7 or 8 tables. The guests were all from a small company that had had an amazing year financially, and the owner was taking everyone out to celebrate their success. Unfortunately, time and alcohol have worked their wonders on my brain, so exact details like numbers, names and exactly what they did have become like dust blowing in the wind. I do remember that the guests were a very varied group of ages and that even the janitor was there. At the time I had started dating one of the waitresses and we were both working this function. It was a silver serve affair with an open bar and unlimited bottles of wine on the table. I'd been assigned to a table that consisted of a bunch of older ladies and they were a delight to serve. My girlfriend on the other hand had drawn the short straw metaphorically and had ended up with a bunch of oiks from the sales team. Young, dumb and full of arrogance and alcohol. They were giving her quite a bit of verbal grief with inappropriate comments and were making her life hard serving and clearing by constantly moving about. I'd offered a couple of times to swap tables but she'd refused. They were really making the most of the free alcohol and were getting very drunk and boisterous, and it was becoming quite obvious the owner was not that happy with their behavior. Starters had finished and we were clearing and setting up for mains when my girlfriend came up to me and told me one of them had grabbed her butt and asked her to go to the toilets with him. Not surprisingly, she agreed to swap tables this time. I carried on clearing and setting their table and was treated to some wonderful conversation about what they would all like to do to my girlfriend. Professional server face slammed into place, but I was seething inside. Mains were being served and I was taking out a very hot platter of meat to silver serve. I'd just started serving the guy to the right of the oik that groped my girlfriend when I enacted my revenge. He was not paying attention to me and was moving about quite a bit, so it was really easy to accidentally touch the side of his head with a very hot platter. Of course this caused him to yelp and start to stand up, which unintentionally made me drop the entire platter of meat and juices all over him. Of course, as a good server I was very humble and apologetic while he started shouting and getting quite aggressive until his boss turned up and told him in no uncertain terms to shut up, said it was entirely his own fault and he was an embarrassment. The boss made him leave the function and actually apologized to me. I'd exacted my revenge and gotten away with it. Not even my girlfriend realized at the time that it was deliberate, although she was most amused and appreciative after I told her. Next one is titled, Continue to Cheat on Me. It's going to backfire hard. Figured I'd share it here for anyone who's been cheated on recently and needs some catharsis, as this is pretty fresh. I met Jane after amicably ending a long-term relationship. I didn't think I'd want to date again, but Jane and I really clicked, and it was such a nice escape. We hung out as friends before moving on to dating, and within 6 months, we had moved in together. I had long since gotten over my ex, and Jane and I were doing great and regularly talking about the future. I was fairly socially awkward and only had a few good friends before meeting her, whereas she had a large circle of acquaintances and friends she introduced me to who became good friends of mine as well. About a year into our relationship, Jane informs me that she had a one-night stand with someone she had met at the bar. She begs for forgiveness, says she's so sorry, that she wasn't used to alcohol, all the usual excuses. Me not wanting to lose this relationship too and having invested so much time thinking about my future with this girl, I believe her. It wasn't easy, and I ended up in therapy for my anxiety, but we worked through it after a lot of talks and crying and long nights, gradually rebuilding trust after she reassured me regularly that I was the one for her, and she was still committed to our relationship. I confided in a few close mutual friends, who kept it to themselves. Everything seemed back on track, and I thought we healed. Another year passes when I notice Jane seems off. She's gone more often, more secretive of her phone. I'll wake up to find her on the computer instead of in bed. Red flags flying. One weekend, she tells me she's going to her mother's to help her with spring cleaning. I don't really get along with or speak to her mother. Her mother is an incredibly religious woman who was already upset with Jane for living with me before marriage and a few other personal decisions on her end, and feels as if she has control over her life due to financially supporting her, which is why I assume she figured it'd be a safe bet I wouldn't talk to her mum. A few hours after she left, I called her a few times, and it went right to voicemail, meaning her phone was off. So, I called her mother knowing she wouldn't answer me and left a voicemail asking if Jane had made it to her house safely and that it had been hours and I hadn't heard from her. A few minutes pass, and she calls me back and tells me that she called Jane and couldn't get an answer as I knew she wouldn't. She started asking when she left, etc., etc. I told her she left that morning to help her with spring cleaning. This was news to her mother, who never spoke to her about that. Her worrying about Jane had her talking. I sit there thinking about what I'll tell Jane when she speaks to her mum and has time to think of an excuse. She gets home later that night and seems totally nonchalant. Turns out her phone is still off, so she hasn't even gotten the calls from me or her mum yet. Perfect. I ask her how her day went. She tells me how much she hates dusting, there was so much on the top of the cabinets, and how they had to carry stuff down to the basement. An elevator would have been nice, all that good stuff. I then decide to let her know I was aware she hadn't been to her mum's. Long story short, she admits to cheating on me again and had been doing so since I had forgiven her for the first time. While I was dealing with the anxiety and insecurity, while she was reassuring me it would never happen again and I was the only one for her, while we talked about buying a place and all our goals, she was ducking around with the same dude, mostly online, but had met up with him every so often for quickies during the day. I basically shut down entirely and went to stay with a friend and told Jane it was over. The more I thought about it, the more my sadness turned to anger, and the stupider I felt for giving her a second chance. I had wasted 2 years of my life and made myself vulnerable to someone I fell in love with who I thought loved me and made a fool of me. Jane was inconsolable, calling me and my friend who I was staying with, texting, and threatening to show up in hopes of fixing it. She was on the verge of a breakdown, claiming she'd do anything, talk to therapists, give me total access to her accounts, anything she could do to make it right, to take back the past, which is when I saw the opportunity to get back at her. I told her I wanted to be able to forgive her, but big changes needed to happen in order for me to do that. She jumped at the opportunity. I told her I needed to be sure she was serious about our future. First, I wanted to look at renting a bigger place, somewhere without bad memories. We were month to month, so I gave my landlord notice and asked her to go through the process of securing us a new lease elsewhere as I couldn't handle it right then. I then told her that if we're going to learn to trust again, I want to start taking steps towards an engagement. I don't want to focus on the past. If I do, I'll want to leave. I just want to focus on the future. And the first step should be a joint account, and that I still trust her with finances, to which she agreed. I deposited a few hundred into the account, told her I had spent the rest of my savings on paying 2 months advance rent to my buddy I was staying with, and he'd give it back to me in installments since I'd be moving out sooner than planned. Now that this was set up, I figured I wanted to ruin her social life, but I knew it would take some more plotting to do that. So, I told her to come back to our apartment. And we stayed there waiting out the end of the month. We cried together, she was overwhelmingly affectionate, let me watch her delete her social media pages, made me breakfast most days. She was just so sorry. I wanted to scream at her so badly, but instead, I'd ask for comfort and reassurance and play the wounded animal. We had plenty of make-up intercourse too, which is the only thing I feel slightly guilty about. She was sure to be extra adventurous for my sake, so when I asked if I could take some photos, she was all for it. During this time, I had been distant from our mutual friends, turning down invites and saying things like, Jane wouldn't want me to go, or asking a few one-on-one for advice for how do they handle it when their partner gets mad. Does your partner ever break stuff or slap you? No, Jane would never do that. I was just wondering. Then, shortly before we planned to move into the new place, I had cold feet. I told her I didn't think I could do it and that I just didn't trust her. She was frantic, pleading with me not to leave again, and begging for something she could do to fix it. So, I told her I believed our social circle put her up to it. She swore up and down that no one had any idea. But I asked how could I believe her. She lied to me twice before. I don't trust her around them, and that a fresh start means new people in our lives too, and that I'd never feel comfortable again as these people that I don't know if I can trust were still around. I wore her down until she agreed to ghost them all. But that wasn't enough for me. I told her that I needed the bridge to be burnt because I don't trust them. So, I had her rejoin and send a message to the group chat complaining about fake friends, backstabbers, and how she was better without them, then block them all. She cried for a long time over that, but if it was what I needed to stay, she'd get over it. I had a bunch of messages from mutual friends asking, what the hell, to which I told them it was complicated, and I'd talk soon. A few more days pass, and it's time to move into the new place. We spend the day moving some things in, and Jane is practically giddy talking about our future plans. I tell her to pick up anything she needs from her mum's, and I'm going to get some stuff from my parents' place, and we'll meet back at the apartment that night. As soon as she leaves, I call my friend, and we pack up everything I had brought over and take it back to his place. Then I message my friends, telling them Jane had been abusive the last few months, which is why I didn't go out, and that the reason she had blocked them is because she thought I told them and that they were telling me to leave her. I then went to the bank and drained our joint account, which had about $400 from me and about $3,700 and some change from her. Then I sent an email to Jane's mother claiming to be an angry ex who had access to my phone, including all those naughty photos I took with Jane. Just thought you should know what your nasty daughter and that piece of crap get up to. And lastly, I had my friend hit me in the eye twice, swelling it up, then blocked Jane and asked two of our mutual friends to meet up with me. And just like that, it was over. I told them how Jane had become mentally and physically abusive over the past few months after I caught her cheating. I showed them the screenshots of her chats with this guy. I told them I had kept quiet to keep the peace, how she lashed out at all of them when she thought they had been helping me behind her back, how it was so out of character, how she threw a remote at me and swelled my eye when we were moving, and that's when I knew I needed to leave and why I needed to take the money to get to safety. Jane showed up to my friend's house looking for me while he told her I had moved and would call the cops if she showed up again while I hid upstairs. I heard how she frantically tried to find me to figure out what was happening and reached out to our mutual friends to make amends and tell them it was all my idea, only to discover the ones I had been talking to and subtly alluding to being abused for weeks, as well as the ones who remembered me coming to them after the first time she cheated, and the ones who had seen my eye, had passed along the information to her entire social circle, and she was met with threats, insults and being ghosted by everyone she knew. How she told the last mutual friend she spoke to before he ghosted her that her mother had said she'd pray for her and cut her off financially for living an unhealthy lifestyle until she can smarten up after seeing the photos, which she can't prove I've ever sent, as her mother certainly wouldn't have kept them, and that she's severely depressed. She's trapped in a 6-month lease with zero money, no friends to rely on, and no one to help her stay afloat aside from maybe her former fling should she run to him. I'll be using her money to cover rent on a new apartment for myself and bought my friend a nice gift for being my accomplice in this. I plan to stay in therapy, both to get over this and to work through my feelings and how low I stoop to get revenge, as I don't want to carry this negativity with me in the future. After that, I plan to relearn how to be single and enjoy life on my own, with the friends I inherited to keep me company. Last one is titled, Brother Gets Me Kicked Out for Coming Out So I Don't Help Him in His Final Hour. My twin brother, Sebastian, and I have never ever been close. In fact, he made life hell growing up, and my parents didn't help by playing favorites, getting him better stuff on our birthday, only going to see films he liked at the cinema and giving him extra money for housework despite us doing the same amount of work. He would always put me down, belittle me, bully me with his friends at school, break my stuff, and he'd then blame me and was just a pain in general. Growing up, the only people I knew to rely on was my older sister Kelly, my cousin Kai and my best friend Isaac, who all knew what an awful person my brother was. Anyway, cut to when I was 17 and I had my first girlfriend, someone I loved very much. We didn't have intercourse because she wanted to wait till her 18th birthday to lose her virginity, but it turns out that she was having an affair with my brother behind my back for half the time we were together and only got caught when it was revealed she was pregnant. I was crushed. She knew how much I hated my brother, and she saw some of the awful things he did to me, but she still went and did that. Cheating is bad enough, but to do it with him of all people. I punched and made him lose a tooth, but according to my parents, I'm the one in the wrong, and now we have to help this girl who is carrying my brother's child and have to help support them. My brother then said he had no intention of being a father and told my girlfriend to take care of it. She then ran out of town, and I never saw her again. I don't know if she had the baby or not, but all I know was that she was gone, and my folks were still praising my brother as the golden child. I was still the black sheep and failure as usual. Another year goes past, and my brother and I still despise each other, but I had started dating again. It was a long while, but I found someone. I found a boy I liked. I come out of the closet, and this new guy, Daniel, I had met at college caught my eye. He was deaf, and I studied sign language out of boredom, so we got talking, and things just seemed to click. We date, fall in love, bring him to my friend Isaac's party to introduce him to friends, and everything feels great. At this point, the only one who knew I was bi was Isaac, but one day walking into a cinema holding my boyfriend's hand, I bump into my evil twin. He points, laughs, and says some homophobic remarks. I tell him to go duck himself, and I go see a movie with my arm around my boyfriend. When I got home after dropping my boyfriend home, I knew I'd be facing something as I walked through the front door. I saw both my parents on the sofa, my mother crying about how on earth could she have given birth to someone so disgusting. Was it too much to hope she saw the light and was talking about my brother? But nope, she was talking about me and how I'm a stain on our family's name. My father gets up to yell at me and spout homophobic remarks and slurs. At this point, I see my brother up the staircase with a grin on his face. He then comes down and says he's uncomfortable with sharing a room with me, and my folks kick me out there and then. With what little clothes and money I had, I went to Isaac's house, and his family took me in where I stayed for 6 months, actually experiencing familial love and affection, and Isaac's mother and stepdad, I consider my own parents now. Eventually, me, Daniel, and Isaac all get a 2-bedroom flat together, and all is good for the time being. So, cut to December last year, me and my boyfriend, now husband, Daniel, are married. Isaac was my best man, and my sister and cousin Kai walked me down the aisle. I have a brilliant job in graphic design, have my own house by the sea, and life has never been better. However, I got a call from my sister that my brother was in the hospital. I hadn't thought about him that much over the 9-year period since I was kicked out, but being reminded of his existence brought up a lot of painful memories for me. I was told by my sister that Sebastian wanted to see me and that it was urgent, so I went to the hospital he was in and met my sister outside the front entrance. I ask her what this is all about, but she doesn't tell me and that I need to ask my twin. So, I arrive where my brother is, who have my parents at his side, and my folks actually look happy to see me, as if what they did to me hadn't happened, and Sebastian also looked really pleased to see me. It's safe to say something was off. Eventually, I ask what's going on and why was I even here, to which my brother tells the family to leave us two alone. He looks so weak as before he used to intimidate me so much. He told me that he was dying from kidney failure and has been for the past few years, but now he didn't have long left. I knew immediately where this was going. He then said he always regretted that we never got along, at which point I told him, no. He looked confused and asked what I was on about, so I simply told him I wasn't going to donate my kidney to save him. He looked as if I had just pooed in his food. He then went on about how bad the situation was and that he really was sorry for all the things we did to each other growing up. Like, excuse me, we did to each other? I told him that I just wanted a brother growing up that cared and loved me, who wouldn't try and break me every day for 18 years. He then called in our mum and dad and told them that I wasn't going to give up my kidney. They then started to spout off that I owe them for my existence and that I have a duty to look after family. I asked them where that duty was when they kicked me out of the house, or where that duty was every time my brother gave me a black eye, or their duty was to look after their grandchild when Sebastian decided he didn't want to be a father. I said for all the things he's done, from outing me to having an affair with my girlfriend and abandoning his child, and that this was the universe's and my way of finally giving back what he dished out to bite him in the butt. I then turned around and walked out of the room, having that be the last time I ever saw Sebastian again. Not sure why they'd want a faggot's kidney anyway. I walked past my sister, who gave me a look. I gave her a look back, who then, in turn, gave me a look that said, "I understand." After leaving the hospital, I felt as if a great weight had been taken off my shoulders. I went home and never looked back, pleased with my decision. Now, last week, I get a call from my sister calling to inform me that Sebastian had died. She asked if I was okay, and I said I was and that I didn't really feel anything, in all honesty. She said she understood to a degree, as Sebastian hadn't been all that kind to her over the years either. I had my husband and Isaac there to support me. Honestly, at this point, Isaac may as well be our adopted child, since he's living with us till this whole situation with the world is over. The next day, I was getting calls and text from family members I hadn't spoken to in years, telling me that I'm going to hell for being a bad son, being a bad brother, and for being a faggot, and that me and my husband don't deserve children. Hubby and I have been looking into adoption and surrogacy. This makes me second guess my choice of not giving my brother my kidney. Even in death, he's making things harder for me. I did wonder if I was a bad person and if I made the wrong decision, but I knew that if I was in that position, I would have been left for dead. Screw him. Other bits of information that may clear things up: his renal failure was from living a hardcore lifestyle of drugs and alcohol. My folks and sister did get themselves tested to see if they're matches, and none of them were. I disowned them of being my family years ago, apart from Kelly, so when I got married, I took my husband's last name and hyphened it with Isaac's last name, to which his folks were very pleased about. Some family, Kai's folks and my dad's brother, have actually called to see how I'm doing and say they don't judge me for what happened. Others, however, have continued with said abuse, whom I have now blocked. If he had been a good brother throughout my life, I'd have done it without a second thought. I'd have done the same for Kelly, Kai, Isaac, and my husband. But I felt he didn't deserve it. It's unlikely I'll ever see my parents again, and I'll make sure my children will never meet them. My revenge to them will be being a better parent than they ever were. Thanks for listening.